Jake Morrison stood in the middle of the huge room and felt very small. The walls stretched up so high, he could barely see the ceiling. Around him sat 12 different alien species, each one looking down at him like he was some kind of bug they had found in their soup dot. The human ambassador straightened his shoulders and tried to look confident. After 50 years of asking, begging, and proving themselves over and over again, humanity had finally been accepted into the Galactic Council. Sort of, your species will receive one vessel, said Counselor Vexai. The alien looked like a walking diamond, all sharp edges and cold light. When he spoke, his voice sounded like breaking glass. It is a mining ship that we no longer need. You should be grateful. Jake wanted to laugh, but he kept his face blank. Grateful, right. After humans had solved 3 different wars between council species, shared their medical knowledge that saved millions of lives, and offered technology that improved space travel for everyone, they were supposed to be grateful for one old ship. Thank you, Counselor, Jake said instead. Humanity accepts your generous gift. The other aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. Jake recognized a few of them from the files he had studied. The tall blue ones were Altarians, supposedly the smartest species in the galaxy. The floating jellyfish-like creatures were Zephyrians, masters of trade and commerce. Each species had ruled parts of space for thousands of years. And now they were giving humans their leftover garbage. 2 days later, Captain Lisa Harper floated in a small shuttle next to what was supposed to be humanity's ticket to the stars. She had seen prettier scrapyards. The ship looked like someone had taken a metal box, beaten it with hammers, and then left it outside in a storm for 20 years. Burn marks covered the hull where asteroid mining had gone wrong. Some of the external panels hung loose, held on by what looked like space tape. The engines were so old, they probably belonged in a museum. Well, said Ryan Bell from the pilot's seat, they certainly have a sense of humor. Ryan was going to be her chief engineer, which meant he would be the one trying to keep this floating disaster running. He was a short, stocky man with hands that were always dirty from fixing things. Right now, those hands were shaking slightly as he read the ship's technical reports. How bad is it? Lisa asked. Bad. Ryan scrolled through page after page of problems. The life support system is 15 years past its replacement date. The engines haven't been properly maintained in decades. Half the sensors don't work, and the other half give readings that make no sense. Lisa stared at the ship through the shuttle window. 25 humans were going to live and work in that thing. They were supposed to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. And the council had given them a death trap to do it with. There's more, Ryan continued. The ship doesn't even have a name anymore. They stripped off all the identification marks. According to these files, it's just hull number 7742 Delta. Then we'll give it a new name, Lisa said quietly. She thought about all the meetings on Earth where politicians and generals had argued about this moment. Some wanted to refuse the council's offer, to tell them to keep their broken-down ship. Others said humanity should be grateful for any chance to prove themselves in space that Lisa had volunteered for. This mission because she believed humans belonged among the stars, not as servants or junior partners, but as equals. Looking at this wreck of a ship, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The shuttle docked with the mining vessel an hour later. Lisa floated through the airlock and got her first real look at what would be her home for the next few years. It was worse. Then the pictures. The main corridor stretched ahead of her like the inside of a metal coffin. Pipes and cables hung from the ceiling in tangled messes. Some of the wall panels had been removed and never replaced, showing the ship's mechanical guts. The air smelled like old metal and recycled fear. "Captain on deck," called out Amy Foster. As Lisa entered what used to be the ship's bridge, Amy was the science officer, a thin woman with bright eyes who could find something interesting in a pile of rocks. Right now, she was poking at a control panel that sparked every few seconds. "Status report," Lisa said, trying to sound like a proper starship captain instead of someone who had just inherited the galaxy's biggest piece of junk. "We have basic life support," Amy replied. "The gravity generators work most of the time. We have enough food for 6 months if we're careful. The water recycling system makes everything taste like metal, but it won't kill us. What about the engines?" "They turn on," said Steve Parker from across the bridge. Steve was her operations officer, a calm man who never seemed worried about anything. Whether they'll actually move us anywhere useful is another question. Lisa walked to the captain's chair, which was really just a mining supervisor's seat, with a few extra controls bolted onto the armrests. She sat down carefully, half expecting it to fall apart. Around her, the bridge hummed and buzzed with the sounds of machinery that was working way too hard to do simple jobs. Warning lights blinked on panels that probably hadn't been updated since before she was born. Everything looked tired. "Pete, what's our first assignment?" Lisa asked. Commander Pete Lewis was her strategic planner, a man who could find opportunity in the worst situations. He pulled up a holographic display that flickered and jumped like a broken television. "The Council wants us to patrol Sector 7, he said. "It's mostly empty space with a few trading posts. Nothing important happens there. Perfect place to park the humans where they can't cause any trouble." Lisa almost smiled. The Council thought they were clever. Give the humans a broken ship and send them to the most boring part of space. When the ship finally broke down completely, they could point to the failure and say the humans just weren't ready for space travel. "Sam, open a channel to Earth," Lisa ordered. Lieutenant Sam Brooks worked the communications panel, coaxing a signal through equipment that should have been replaced decades ago. Static filled the air, then cleared enough for voices to get through. "Earth. Control, this is Captain Harper, aboard the human vessel Defiance." She had chosen the name in that moment, and it felt right. Not the name of a ship that was supposed to fail quietly, but one that refused to accept defeat. "Defiance, this is Earth Control. Report your status." "We are operational and ready to begin our mission," Lisa said. Behind her, Ryan made a choking sound that might have been laughter. "Tell them we're going to make this work." After she closed the channel, the bridge fell quiet, except for the constant background noise of struggling machinery. Her crew looked at her with expressions that mixed hope with doubt. "So," Amy said finally, "what do we do with a ship that's held together with prayer and good intentions?" Lisa stood up from the captain's chair and looked around at her team. These 25 humans were supposed to prove their species belonged in space. The Council had given them the worst possible tools for the job. "We do what humans do best," she said. "We figure out how to make it work anyway." Outside the viewports, stars waited in the endless darkness of space. Somewhere among them were alien civilizations that had written off humanity before giving them a real chance. They thought they had been clever, giving the humans a floating coffin and expecting them to quietly disappear into the void. They had no idea what they had actually done. They had given humanity exactly what it needed to prove them wrong. 6 months had passed since the Defiance left Earth's orbit, and the ship looked nothing like the broken-down mining vessel the Council had given them. Captain Lisa Harper walked through corridors that hummed with new purpose, past walls that sparkled with jury-rigged improvements her crew had built from spare parts and determination. "Captain, you need to see this," Ryan Bell called from the engineering bay. His voice carried excitement that had become common on the ship as each day brought new discoveries about what their floating coffin could actually do. Lisa found her. Chief Engineer crouched next to what used to be a simple asteroid mining laser. Now it looked like something completely different. New focusing lenses caught the light at impossible angles. Power cables snaked around the device in patterns that made no sense according to standard engineering texts. Remember how these mining lasers were supposed to just break up rocks? Ryan asked, wiping grease from his hands with a rag they had. Seen better days. Well, I got curious about what else they might do. He powered up the device and aimed it at a piece of metal scrap floating outside the ship. The laser fired, and instead of the rough blast that mining equipment usually produced, a precise beam cut through the metal like it was made of paper. Ryan, that's incredible, Lisa said, watching the perfect cut seal itself as the metal cooled. How did you figure this out? Desperation, mostly, Ryan laughed. When your equipment is this old, you start looking at everything differently. You stop thinking about what things are supposed to do and start wondering what they actually can do. Lisa had seen this same creative thinking throughout her ship. Amy Foster had turned the cargo holds into something she called resource laboratories. The huge spaces meant for storing mined asteroids now processed raw materials faster than most council factories. The key is thinking bigger, Amy had explained earlier that week, showing Lisa through labs that buzzed with activity. Council. Ships have specialized equipment for everything. We have one big space that we can adapt for anything. The results spoke for themselves. The Defiance could now refine metals, manufacture complex parts, and even produce food supplements from basic elements. What the Council saw as primitive cargo space, humans had turned into the most flexible manufacturing system in known space, but the real breakthrough had come from their engines. The old-fashioned reaction drive that Council species considered backward had become their greatest advantage. Most modern ships can only burn specific fuels, Steve Parker had discovered during their 3rd month in space. Our engines are so simple, they can burn almost anything that creates thrust. This meant the Defiance never had to worry about fuel shortages. Space debris became fuel. Asteroid fragments became fuel. Even garbage could be processed and burned. To keep them moving, other ships needed special fuel stations and careful planning. The Defiance could eat the universe and keep going. The real test came when they encountered their first emergency. A Zephyrian trading vessel had broken down. Near a small asteroid field, its sleek modern systems crippled by a power failure that left 47 crew members stranded in dead space. Council protocols say we should report the situation and wait for proper rescue services, Pete Lewis pointed out as they detected the distress signal. How long would that take? Lisa asked. At least 12 hours for the message to reach Council. Space, then another 8 hours for a rescue ship to arrive. If they decide the Zephyrians are worth saving. Lisa looked at the readings from the disabled ship. Life support was failing. The crew had maybe 6 hours of air left. Council rescue services would arrive to find corpses floating in space. Plot. An intercept course, she ordered. Captain, Sam Brooks said from the communication station, this violates about 15 different Council regulations about species interaction protocols. Then we'll deal with the consequences later, Lisa replied. Right now, people are dying. The rescue operation became something the crew would talk about for years. Using their mining lasers as cutting tools, they sliced through the Zephyrian ship's damaged hull to reach the trapped crew. The massive cargo holds became emergency shelters, housing all 47 aliens while repairs were made. Ryan and his engineering team worked alongside Zephyrian technicians, sharing knowledge that helped fix the damaged systems. Amy's resource labs produced replacement parts that perfectly matched the alien technology. The Defiance's crude but reliable systems kept everyone alive, while the sleek Council vessel was restored to working order. The entire rescue took 3 hours when Council emergency services finally arrived. They found the Zephyrian ship fully operational and the Defiance already preparing to leave. The rescue commander, a proud Altarian who had expected to find floating bodies, could barely hide his shock. "This is impossible," he transmitted to Lisa. "Your vessel lacks the proper equipment for deep space rescue operations." "We made do with what we had," Lisa replied simply. News of the rescue spread through channels the Council never monitored. Trading posts and supply stations buzzed with stories of the human ship that had saved an entire crew using nothing but mining equipment and clever thinking. Some aliens started asking questions about these humans and their remarkable floating coffin. The Defiance continued its patrol through Sector 7, but now other ships made excuses to visit the area. Traders who claimed to need repairs, survey vessels that happened to be passing through, independent operators who wanted to see the humans who had turned junk into miracles. Each visitor left with stories. Stories of humans who could fix anything, with spare parts and creativity. Stories of a ship that could manufacture solutions to problems that specialized Council vessels couldn't handle. Stories that spread from system to system, carried by the network of free traders and independent crews that kept the galaxy's economy running. "We're becoming famous," Amy observed one evening as she watched a Korath engineering ship dock with them for the third time that month. The small, precise aliens had become regular visitors, fascinated by human approaches to problem solving. "The Council won't like that," Pete warned. "They gave us this assignment to keep us quiet and invisible." Fame was not part of their plan. Lisa nodded, understanding the implications. The Council had expected humanity to fail quietly in the backwater sectors of space. Instead, they were succeeding loudly enough that other species were starting to pay attention. But there was something else happening that worried and excited her at the same time. The aliens who visited the Defiance weren't just curious about human ingenuity. They were sharing their own knowledge and techniques. Korath precision engineering, Silene intuitive navigation, Veltar energy manipulation methods that made human systems work better than ever. The floating coffin the Council had given them was becoming something entirely new. Not just a human ship, but a symbol of what could happen when different species worked together as equals instead of following the rigid hierarchy that kept the Council in power. And Lisa suspected it was exactly the kind of thing the Council would do anything to stop. The docking bay of Station Omega 7 buzzed with activity as the Defiance settled into its berth. Lisa Harper watched through the bridge viewport as dozens of different alien species moved cargo, performed repairs, and conducted business in the organized chaos of a frontier trading post. This was not the kind of place Council ships usually visited. Omega 7 sat on the edge of civilized space, serving independent traders, salvage crews, and the various species that the Council considered too small or too primitive to matter. It was exactly the kind of place that welcomed a human ship with a reputation for helping others. "Captain, we have visitors," Sam Brooks announced from the communication station. "The station master wants to meet with you personally." Lisa made her way to the airlock, where a small, furry creature waited with what appeared to be nervous excitement. She recognized the species from her files as Korath, known throughout the galaxy for their engineering skills, but dismissed by the Council as too small to be taken seriously. "Captain Harper," the alien said in perfect English, his voice high and precise, "I am Engineer Prime Zixtal. Your reputation has reached even this distant station." "Word travels fast out here," Lisa replied, studying the alien's bright, intelligent eyes. "Faster than you might think," Zixtal said with what might have been a smile on his furry face. "The traders speak of your rescue of the Zephyrian vessel. They say you accomplished in 3 hours what Council rescue services could not do in 3 days." Over the next few hours, Lisa discovered that the Defiance had become something of a legend among the galaxy's forgotten populations. Species that the Council barely acknowledged had heard stories of the human ship that turned impossible situations into routine successes. "You must understand," explained Velra, a tall, graceful Cylani whose skin shifted colors as she spoke. Most of us have learned to expect very little from the Council. They see us as useful servants, nothing more. But your people treat us as equals. Lisa found herself in the station's main meeting hall, surrounded by representatives from a dozen different species. None of them held high positions in Council society, but each had skills and knowledge that impressed her crew. The Korath were master engineers who could build precision equipment that lasted for centuries. The Cylani possessed an intuitive understanding of space navigation that made them natural pilots. The Veltar had developed biological technologies that could solve problems in ways mechanical systems never could. The Council wastes our potential, said Morthic, a Veltar whose tentacles moved in patterns that seemed to express frustration. They give us simple tasks and expect us to be grateful for the opportunity to serve our betters. Ryan Bell had spent the morning working with Korath engineers, learning techniques that had been developed over thousands of years but never shared with other species. They know things about metalworking that could revolutionize our manufacturing, he told Lisa during a break. But the Council keeps all species separate, so knowledge never gets shared. Amy Foster was equally excited about what she had learned from Veltar scientists. They don't just manipulate energy, she explained, her eyes bright with discovery. They think about it completely differently. Instead of forcing power through systems, they work with natural energy flows. It's like the difference between damming a river and learning to swim with the current. The real breakthrough came when the different species started working together on the Defiance itself. Korath precision combined with human adaptability, too. Create tools that were both elegant and practical. Cylani navigation techniques merged with human strategic thinking to plot courses that were faster and safer than anything in Council databases. Most impressive was when Veltar energy manipulation enhanced the ship's power systems. They didn't just make things more efficient. They made the entire vessel work in harmony with itself, in ways that human engineering alone could never achieve. Look at this, Steve Parker said, showing Lisa the readings from their upgraded engines. Power consumption is down 30%, but output is up 50%. The whole ship is working better because all the systems are talking to each other properly. Pete Lewis understood the bigger picture immediately. This isn't just about fixing one ship, he said as they watched mixed crews of humans and aliens installing new improvements. This is proof that cooperation works better than the Council's system of keeping everyone separate and ranked. The transformation was remarkable. The Defiance had arrived at Omega 7 as an impressive example of human ingenuity. It was leaving as something entirely new, a fusion of technologies and techniques from species across the galaxy, all working together toward common goals. But the changes went beyond just technical improvements. Lisa noticed that her own crew was different too. They moved with more confidence, spoke with more authority, and approached problems with creativity that surprised even her. We're not just the underdogs anymore, Sam observed as they prepared to leave the station. We're becoming something the Council never expected. What's that? Lisa asked. Proof that their whole system is wrong. The departure from Omega 7 felt different from any previous mission. Word had spread through the networks of independent traders and frontier settlements that the human ship was more than just another Council vessel. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when different species worked together as equals. Requests for assistance came from systems the Council barely acknowledged existed. Mining colonies needed help with equipment failures. Trading convoys wanted escorts through dangerous space. Research stations requested technical assistance with problems their limited resources couldn't solve. Each mission brought new challenges and new opportunities to learn. The Defiance became a traveling hub of innovation, carrying knowledge and techniques between species that had never been allowed to share them before. The Council created their hierarchy to maintain control, Amy noted in her personal log. By keeping species separate and ranked, they prevent the kind of cooperation that might challenge their authority. But we're proving that diversity makes everyone stronger. Lisa agreed, but she also worried about what would happen when the council noticed what they were building. The network of cooperation growing around the Defiance wasn't just changing how problems got solved in the outer systems. It was challenging the fundamental assumptions that kept the council in power as they set course for their next mission. Lisa looked around the bridge where human officers worked alongside Korath engineers, Cylani navigators, and Veltar energy specialists. This was no longer just a human ship with alien visitors. It had become something new, a vessel that represented the potential of true cooperation between species. The council had given them a floating coffin and expected them to disappear quietly. Instead, they had created something that might change the galaxy forever. And Lisa suspected the council was finally starting to notice. The message arrived with all the ceremony the Galactic Council could pack into a single transmission. Official seals, formal language, and the kind of authority that had kept 12 species in power for thousands of years. Captain Lisa Harper. Read it twice before calling her senior staff to the bridge. They want me to appear before the full council, she announced to her assembled crew. Charges include exceeding operational parameters, unauthorized technological development, and inappropriate interspecies collaboration. Ryan Bell let out a short laugh. Inappropriate collaboration. They make it sound like we committed a crime by working together. In their minds we did, Pete Lewis said grimly. The council's power depends on keeping species separate and ranked. What we've been doing threatens that entire system. The journey to council headquarters took 3 days, during which reports kept arriving about increased council activity throughout the galaxy. Inspections at independent stations. New regulations about technology sharing. Restrictions on which species could work together on projects. They're scared, Amy Foster observed as she reviewed the intelligence reports. Everything we've accomplished proves their system is inefficient. They're trying to shut us down before more species start asking uncomfortable questions. Lisa spent those 3 days preparing for what she knew would be the most important meeting of her life. Not just for humanity, but for every species that had been told they weren't good enough to matter in council space. The council chambers were designed to intimidate. Massive walls stretched up into shadows, while 12 different alien species sat on raised platforms that forced visitors to look up at them like children seeking approval from adults. Lisa walked across the polished floor to the speaker's position, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Captain Harper, Counselor Vexhai began, his crystalline form refracting light in sharp, cold patterns. You stand accused of violating the terms of your species' membership in this council. Your vessel has exceeded its designated operational parameters and engaged in unauthorized activities throughout our space. Lisa looked up at the 12 representatives and felt the weight of their combined disapproval. These beings had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and they expected her to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to promise that humanity would behave better in the future. Instead, she smiled. Honored counselors, Lisa said, her voice carrying clearly through the enormous chamber. Thank you for this opportunity to report on our mission's success. A ripple of surprise went through the assembly. This was not how these hearings usually began. You gave us a mining vessel that was scheduled for destruction, Lisa continued. You told us it was generous. You expected us to fail quietly and prove that humanity wasn't ready for space travel. Instead, we turned that ship into something remarkable. You violated explicit instructions about your role in council space. Counselor Zeph Run interrupted, his tall blue form radiating authority. You have interfered with. We saved lives, Lisa said firmly, cutting him off in a breach of protocol that sent shock waves through the chamber. We've made discoveries that benefit every species in the galaxy. We've built partnerships that make everyone stronger. If that violates your rules, then maybe your rules need to be examined." The silence that followed felt dangerous. No one interrupted a council member. No one questioned council authority. No one suggested that they're ancient. Rules might be wrong. Lisa reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device that projected holographic displays above her head. Images filled the air, showing the transformed Defiance, the rescued Zephyrian crew, the innovations developed through interspecies cooperation. "This is what we accomplished with your floating coffin," she said as the images shifted to show technical diagrams, rescue operations, and breakthrough discoveries. Every modification, every improvement, every life saved was possible because different species worked together as equals. The evidence was overwhelming. Rescue operations that had saved hundreds of lives. Technical innovations that had been adopted by dozens of civilizations. Trade routes that were safer and more efficient than anything the Council had established. But the most shocking revelation came when Amy Foster's complete research files began displaying throughout the chamber. The modifications to the mining vessel hadn't just created one exceptional ship. They had developed blueprints for an entirely new approach to space technology. These designs show vessels that can be built cheaply from common materials, Lisa explained as the technical specifications scrolled past. Ships that can adapt to any mission, operate efficiently in any environment, and be maintained by crews. With basic training, no specialized facilities required, no rare materials needed, no complex hierarchies to coordinate. Counselor Mergath of the Hegemony leaned forward, his insectoid features clicking with agitation. These modifications were made without proper authorization. The safety implications alone have been thoroughly tested, Lisa interrupted again. Our rescue record speaks for itself. Our safety statistics are better than most Council vessels. Our operational efficiency exceeds your best ships by significant margins. The chamber erupted in angry chittering, crystalline ringing, and electronic buzzing as the Council members discussed this unprecedented challenge to their authority. Lisa stood calmly in the center of the storm, watching beings who had never been questioned struggle with information they couldn't dismiss. Finally, Counselor Zephrun called for order. His voice carried the weight of millennia when he spoke. "These claims require verification," he announced. "Independent analysis of your vessel's capabilities and safety records must be conducted before any conclusions can be drawn." "Of course," Lisa replied. "But while you're analyzing our successes, perhaps you should also examine your failures." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. "What failures?" Vexhai demanded, his crystalline form flaring. "With dangerous light. The species you've dismissed as inferior have capabilities you've never bothered to discover," Lisa said. "The Korath engineering techniques that improved our systems beyond your specifications. The Sileni navigation methods that make your routes obsolete. The Veltar energy manipulation that puts your power systems to shame." She gestured to the holographic displays still floating above her head. "You've spent thousands of years keeping these species in subordinate roles, telling them they're not smart enough or advanced enough to contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. But when given the chance to work as equals, they've created innovations that surpass anything in your databases." The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute. Then Counselor Zephrun spoke the words that would change everything. "These technologies ... if verified, could revolutionize space travel for every civilization in the galaxy." Lisa nodded. "That was always the point, Counselor. Not to prove humanity's superiority, but to prove that cooperation works better than hierarchy. That innovation comes from freedom, not control. That every species has something valuable to contribute if you give them the chance." The Council faced a choice that would define the future of galactic civilization. They could admit their system was flawed and embrace the cooperative model the humans had demonstrated. Or they could try to suppress the evidence and maintain their power through increasingly desperate measures. Looking at the angry, frightened faces around her, Lisa suspected. She knew which path they would choose. The council's response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Lisa Harper's testimony, emergency sessions convened across council space. New regulations appeared overnight, banning the technologies the humans had developed. Orders went out to confiscate any ships using unauthorized modifications. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Defiance as council warships surrounded them in formation. 12 massive vessels, each one representing the military might of a different council. Species. Their weapons were powered and targeting systems locked onto the small human ship. They're demanding we surrender for immediate inspection and impoundment, Sam Brooks reported from the communications station. His voice was steady, but Lisa could see the tension in his shoulders. How many ships? Lisa asked. 47 in the immediate area, Steve Parker replied, checking his sensors. More arriving every hour. They've committed a third of their available fleet to this operation. Ryan Bell laughed from his engineering station. 47 ships to stop one mining vessel. I'd be flattered if I wasn't so terrified. But Lisa wasn't looking at the warships surrounding them. She was watching the smaller vessels that hung back in the shadows of the council fleet. Independent traders, salvage crews, and ships from dozens of species that had worked with the Defiance over the past 2 years. Amy, are you getting those transmissions? Lisa asked. Amy Foster nodded, her fingers dancing over her control panels. Communications from over 200 vessels. They're all asking the same question. What do you need us to do? The network they had built was revealing itself. Species that the council had dismissed as unimportant were choosing sides, and they weren't choosing the council. Captain, Pete Lewis said quietly, I'm reading energy signatures from Korath engineering ships. They're powering up systems that aren't in any council database. Through the viewports, Lisa could see ships moving into new positions, not threatening the council fleet directly, but making it clear they were ready to act. The small Silene vessels, with their superior navigation, were positioning themselves to control key space lanes. Veltar ships were coordinating in patterns that suggested they had communication methods the council couldn't monitor. Open a channel to all vessels, Lisa ordered. Captain Harper to all ships in the area, she announced when Sam nodded that. The channel was live. Thank you for your support, but this isn't your fight. The council wants the Defiance, not you. The response came from Captain Zix Tau of the Korath engineering vessel Precision. With respect, Captain Harper, you are wrong. This is exactly our fight. For too long, we have accepted that others decide our worth. Today, that ends. Similar messages flooded in from every direction. The Silene refused to abandon their human friends. The Viltar declared that cooperation could not be destroyed by force. Even species Lisa had never worked with directly announced their support for the principles the Defiance represented. Counselor Vexhigh's transmission cut through the chatter with crystalline authority. All vessels will disperse immediately. Any ship that interferes with council operations will be declared hostile and dealt with accordingly. The threat hung in space like a challenge no one wanted to accept. For a moment, Lisa thought the other ships might actually leave. The council fleet was overwhelming, and no one wanted to start a war. Then something remarkable happened. The Korath ships began transmitting technical specifications, not just to the Defiance, but to every ship in the area. Blueprints for improvements. That could make any vessel more efficient, more powerful, more capable. Information that had been guarded for thousands of years was suddenly being shared freely. The Silene followed with navigation data that revealed faster, safer routes between star systems. routes that would make Council control of trade lanes irrelevant. The Veltar shared energy manipulation techniques that could revolutionize how every species powered their technology. They're not just supporting us, Amy realized, watching the flood of data flowing between ships. They're sharing everything they know. All the knowledge the Council kept locked away in separate boxes. Lisa understood what was happening. The weapon they had created wasn't the ship or its modifications, or even the rescue operations that had made them famous. The weapon was the idea itself. The proof that cooperation worked better than control, that innovation came from freedom rather than hierarchy, that every species had something valuable to contribute. And now that idea was spreading faster than the Council could. Stop it. Council fleet is powering weapons, Steve reported with grim calm. All ships, this is your final warning, Bexai transmitted. Disperse or face the consequences. Lisa took a deep breath and made the decision that would define the rest of Galactic history. This is Captain Harper to all vessels, she announced. Begin information transfer protocol. Share everything. Every technical specification, every innovation, every improvement we've developed together. Send it to every system, every station, every ship in the galaxy. The response was immediate. Hundreds of vessels began broadcasting simultaneously, filling space with transmissions that carried decades of accumulated knowledge and breakthrough discoveries. Information that would allow any species to build better ships, develop new technologies, and solve problems the Council claimed only they could handle. They can't stop all of us, Zixtal transmitted with what sounded like joy in his high-pitched voice. The knowledge is already spreading beyond their ability to contain. The Council fleet held position for 3 more hours while emergency sessions debated their response. They could destroy the ships in front of them, but the information was already loose in the galaxy. Every independent trader, every frontier station, every species the Council had dismissed now had access to technologies that would change everything. Finally, the warships began to withdraw, not in defeat, but in recognition that the galaxy had already changed beyond their ability to control. 6 months later, Lisa stood on the observation deck of a ship that bore no resemblance to the floating coffin the Council had given them. The Defiance had become the flagship of a new kind of fleet, vessels, built by cooperation between species that had learned to see each other as equals rather than competitors. Status report, she said to Amy, who now coordinated research efforts across dozens of species. 300 ships have been completed using our cooperative design principles, Amy replied. Another 1,000 are under construction. The improvements keep coming as more species contribute their knowledge. The Council still existed, but their absolute authority was gone. Independent systems had formed new alliances based on mutual benefit rather than hierarchical control. Trade flowed along routes the Silene had revealed. Technologies improved through cross-species collaboration that no regulation could prevent. They gave us a floating coffin, Lisa said, looking out at stars that no longer seemed impossibly distant, because they thought it would prove we weren't worthy of their respect. Ryan Bell joined her at the viewport, his hands still bearing the stains of honest work. Instead, we prove that worth isn't something others get to decide for you. The Defiance continued its mission, no longer alone in the vast darkness of space. Everywhere they traveled, they found species working together, sharing knowledge, and building something better than the rigid hierarchy that had ruled the galaxy for so long. The Council had tried to give humanity a weapon of their own, destruction. Instead, they had created the instrument of their obsolescence, not through conquest or violence, but through the simple revolutionary idea that everyone deserved a chance to prove what they could accomplish when treated as equals. And across the galaxy, on ships built with shared knowledge and crewed by species working toward common goals, that revolution continued every day.